Okay, guys, just basic video. It's good stuff to know if you're doing things, do it yourself, right? It's okay. So you think you may have a possible alternator issue and you want to see if it's charging. So you can use a multimeter at home. And I just happen to have this digital one. Anything works as long as you use the proper scale on it, the DC scale, of course. And there's a way to indicate that. DC has one bar that's completely put together, and then you have another one that's broken, and that would be your ground, and then of course your positive, that straight line, because it's direct. And alternating current has a wave, because it's a waveform, alternates back and forth, so it's actually a frequency. It waves. It's a wave. So we're going to turn it on and see where we're at here. So this is a new battery, so we're going to be good there. But I just wanted to show you guys a quick way to test for your alternator. So we're at 1255. That's a really good idle voltage for a battery that's been sitting on the shelf. That means it's maintaining a really good charge. Let's start it up real quick. And what I want to look for is, let me flip the, we can be together, is a voltage of at least, you want to see 13.8 out of it. And alternators nowadays, they have ones that float, which enables them to be able to kind of like unload if the battery's really good and charged. They can tell, because you actually saw these GM vehicles and a lot of new cars, you'll see a negative, on the negative cable, you see like a little thing around it right there close to the battery cable. That's a shunt, and it can measure, or I'm sorry, it's an inductor. It can measure the amount of negative electrons pulling through. In other words, what the load is on the battery, how much demand is there, and it can float the alternator and helps for fuel mileage, and it helps the alternator not be having to work so hard. Well, in this case, you'd want to see at least, with the headlights on, you'd see 13.8 volts, because you've got a load, so the alternator should pick up and start doing something. So I do like to test a lot of newer vehicles with the headlights on to make sure that that shunt says, okay, we've got a pull, so let's go ahead and get right. So let's fire this thing up real quick. This is by the way, this is a first start too. I just put the battery in, and so that was pretty good that it actually learned how to idle that quick. So let's flip the camera around and see what kind of voltage we see. Wow, that's good. Now, I've got headlights on, so I they're daytime running. But what? That's a really good voltage. Since the battery is up now, it can float a little bit. It can allow it to kind of back off some. You have one of those little sensors right here I was talking about. You see it around that negative cable? I don't know if you can hear my voice, but you see around that negative cable, that's an inductor that can kind of tell how much the alternator needs to, how hard the alternator needs to work. And it can fluctuate that voltage. It helps the regulator kind of determine where and when, because it actually gives the regulator, not in that alternator, it's going outside the ECM, square wave signal. It gets a square wave signal. Ford does the same thing, like their Escapes and all that. It uses a square wave signal feeding the back of the regulator so it can float the alternator. So let's flip the camera. Thank you for watching that little quick video. As you can see, we had a good voltage. Now, if that was a problematic alternator, we'd see battery voltage. And battery voltage would mean that there's no charge going back into it. That means that the alternator has failed, or something in line with the charging system, like a main fuse, possible main wire that goes from the alternator to the fuse to the battery. Or you could have an ECM issue on some instances where the ECM's not telling the alternator to pick up and go. And I have had that happen before. Had an Escape one time that I was just talking about that gave me a fit. That was a crazy thing. Had a hard alternator to change. So that's it. We're going to get out of here. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for tuning in. We'll fix it to you guys. Woo.